What are the biggest issues facing the four teams from the AFC West going into this NFL offseason? It's time to break it down for you right here as we wrap up another week on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinny Ireland. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. Come there. We got your combine tracker up as well as my review of the quarterbacks. We'll talk about the combine there early next week. So a little bit of thoughts there. We'll break it down. We'll do it from the draft prospect perspective as well as giving you some insight on what's going on with the NFL front offices and rumors that circulated from there. So we'll do a roundup of that for you, as well as a look at the prospects. We'll take a break from our look at the division by division biggest offseason questions. We will get in one more division this week. We finished the entire NFC there for you from west to east. Now we'll start the same thing with the AFC. So we also have free agency right around the corner. So we wanted to set the table for all these teams, and we will get to all the divisions there by next week for sure for you. So we'll start and look at the AFC West today, and we'll go all the way to the East as we wrap up our division by division look here. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available for you on all platforms. And now let's talk about teams in the AFC West. And we go alphabetical order like we always do, and it makes sense. Denver has the biggest question mark here. Who will be the starting quarterback for the Broncos here in 2022? They've hired a new coach. We know Nathaniel Hackett. He was the Packers offense coordinator with Aaron Rodgers. He comes over here and takes over in Denver as a rookie head coach. He's still a pretty young guy. Justin Outen, he was the tight ends coach for the Packers under Matt LaFleur and Hackett. He comes along with Hackett here. So big changes. We talked about there Luke Getsy. He was part of the Packers offense as well. He's now running the Bears offense. So Getsy, Outen, and Hackett all leave there, but they have Matt LaFleur there, and they also have Tom Clements back in Green Bay. So interesting that the Broncos want to adopt those philosophies here in their offense, moving on from Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur. So what do? George Patton is a pretty aggressive general manager. He orchestrated the Kirk Cousins move there and helped in Minnesota with the Rick Spielman. So they like making a splash, and they need to make a splash. Patton, pretty good start. I think he's assembled some decent talent there. I really like the Javonte Williams pick of last year. He's going to be up and running and rolling here with the Melvin Gordon heading into free agency. They also locked up their two receivers, Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick. So good establishment there. You also have Garrett Bowles, really overcame some early career struggles to be a solid left tackle. So some really good pieces around the quarterback. Now, Drew Lock is technically under contract. Teddy Bridgewater is a free agent. So Bridgewater's not going to be back, but Drew Lock is still an option and would be the starting quarterback right now. No one expects him to be the guy going forward. There's been a lot of buzz about Aaron Rodgers coming over to Denver, but I think it's getting squelched a little bit here because you have Tom Clements there, as we mentioned, in Green Bay. There's a lot of appeal there if they take care of Devontae Adams, upgrade at wide receiver, take care of their salary cap issues, adjust and keep their defense intact here. On top of maybe to get some salary cap relief, giving Rodgers a bigger deal with greater money overall, but cap relief now with a bigger payday later for Rodgers to make sure this is his last contract in the NFL and staying with Green Bay. So some things to watch for there. With the Broncos, I mean, this is a pretty good team to inherit. I mean, Jerry Jeudy's been a bit disappointing, but he's a versatile receiver. If he can stay healthy, can be effective. There are some good buzz things about him we know with that team. Then you also have Sutton, who also could rebound on the outside. Don't forget about Noah Fant. You have a tight end coach coming over here, so that should help Fant for sure. We know that he's excited about it. I talked to him at the Super Bowl, and he was excited that they're going to design new ways to scheme him open. I think they really failed to do that. I think Fant is their most interesting offensive weapon because of his versatility. Not the greatest blocker in the world, and he'll admit he's getting better at that, but he's a guy, again, that can stretch the field down the seam. He should be a lot more productive than he is. I think we've had that frustration here in fantasy football where, no offense, seems to be using his speed and quickness and doing something every time they throw to him, and they don't throw to him quite enough. So I think he can tap into his upside here. So he's not a question mark. I think he's fine. Sutton and Judy, there's still the jury out on both of these guys. Sutton to stay healthy and be up to that size, speed, strength prospect to stretch the field at times, but also be effective in the red zone. Judy, I think, fits best in the slot if they can keep Tim Patrick outside. So Broncos have some weapons between those three receivers. And Fant, and don't forget about Williams. He's a pretty dynamic pass catcher if needed. Melvin Gordon really didn't do a lot in that capacity. He was basically the power runner sharing the work with Williams. But excited to see what the Broncos can do here. But where do they go at quarterback? I mean, it's a good question. They have another top 10 pick. Do they pass up on Justin Fields like option here in 2022? There isn't one right now. That's the biggest issue. We saw Liberty's Malik Willis and Pitt's Kenny Pickett work out pretty well at the Combine. We'll have more on them when we review the Combine early next week with all the results in. But those could be an option for sure. Right now, I have the Commanders stepping into the first quarterback pick with Willis at number 11 overall. But the Broncos, a couple picks before, should really start thinking about that because I don't think Rodgers is going to materialize. People have talked about Jimmy Garoppolo. Would he be a good transitional fit here in this quarterback-friendly offense? Yeah, he could be. We know that Garoppolo is pretty effective when he has a pretty good supporting cast here. I don't know who else. You could look at Carson Wentz maybe for the Broncos going in that direction, but it has to be someone that they think has some winning upside. And Wentz does have that. We know that. He was part of a Super Bowl team at his best in Philadelphia. Jimmy Garoppolo got to one Super Bowl, was on the brink of winning another NFC championship against the Rams here in these playoffs. So those type of quarterbacks are available. I don't think it's going to be a straight-up bridge. They want to start winning with this quarterback. So I still think it's more likely the Broncos use a high pick on a quarterback. I right now don't have them taking a quarterback there early in the first round. I have them actually taking Sam Howell of North Carolina, but I think that could change here coming out of the Combine in my next mock draft here. So we'll watch that for sure. But the Broncos need a bona fide first-round franchise quarterback, and we're not talking about another Paxton Lynch here for Denver. That's the guy that's going to tie everything together, increase the fantasy value of those receivers, bump up Fant, and give someone respectable to create some balance so Javonte Williams can assume his position as an RB1 stud here without Gordon in 2022. All right, we still have to talk about the Chiefs. Then we go from Kansas City to Las Vegas, and then Las Vegas to Los Angeles here. Feel like we're playing game of Ticket to Ride here in the West Coast, but Denver and Kansas City, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles will be covered on this show. So we'll do the Chiefs Raiders next in our middle segment to kind of set the table for those teams' off seasons as well. Football, we know, is over. We're talking about next season already for this season, but basketball still is in full steam here for both pro and college hoops. We know that it's almost time for the NBA playoffs. The play-in tournament's going to be exciting. Then you have NCAAs coming around the corner here once we get to the conference tournaments. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your choice for hockey, boxing, and also your source for Ultimate Fighting Championship odds. Don't forget about Jorge Masvidal in action and Colby Covington this weekend. Right to the international events, including Olympics, which just passed, and golf all throughout the summer. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends and action only at betonline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we will continue breaking down our teams in the AFC West, the biggest offseason questions there. We'll do a double shot here on this segment, the Chiefs and Raiders. Before we do that, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, much like this show, Locked On Fantasy Football. Now, the Chiefs, we won't spend a lot of time on the Chiefs because they don't really have a lot of questions. We know Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce will be back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The only question there is Orlando Brown Jr. Do they keep him long-term or do they franchise tag him at the cost of maybe losing Tyrann Mathieu if they can hammer a long-term deal with the quarterback safety hybrid? So Orlando Brown Jr., Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. This is part of the offensive line overhaul for the Chiefs. Did it with a couple guys outside. Thuney as a free agent. You had Brown acquired in a trade, and then you had those two other guys, Humphrey and Smith, drafted here. So I think they'll want to keep that front intact here for Patrick Mahomes and that running game. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they're still hopeful it can be a top power back. The Chiefs do know that Darrell Williams will be a free agent. That Derek Gore is also a restricted free agent here, but Darrell Williams might be out of this mix. That would help the value of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The biggest question for the Chiefs, are they going to find that next receiver to help? We saw Mecole Hardman flash at times, but it wasn't enough. Demarcus Robinson, they could move on from him. They didn't keep Sammy Watkins, which hurt them a little bit, I think, as a third target. He was pretty good in that role for them. So that's going to be a priority here. I look at Drake London. I look at Jahan Dotson. Treylon Burks, could they trade up and get him? Just imagine Treylon Burks with his size and strength and speed playing off what Tyreek Hill can do outside and inside, and Travis Kelce working the seam here. That would be a really tough offense to stop. So that's a question mark. We threw it out for the Packers. They need that next option for Devontae Adams. But I think the Chiefs could use a third option. I think if you don't have three options, we saw that with the Rams and Bengals. Both of those teams had three options in the passing game. It made a big difference. It creates mismatches. Most teams are not that deep in defensive back to cover. And I think the Chiefs put themselves in position where it was easy to take out Hill or Kelce. The teams that had the personnel to do both and contain them really gave them a lot of trouble. And the Bengals did that to some degree with their containment here in much of that game against the Chiefs. So it is imperative here that the Chiefs get one more weapon. Is it elevating one of their guys that they already have or going out and getting one? But that would help Patrick Mahomes immensely here and also help Hill and Kelce get open, be schemed open a little bit easier as they get older with their roles in this offense. Now for the Las Vegas Raiders, we'll just keep it simple. What do you expect from Josh McDaniels in this offense? Well, Derek Carr, I think right now, based on the lateness of the offseason already, as we're in March, I don't think Derek Carr's going to anywhere. We haven't heard anything to that front here that they're going to move on from him. It's a very quarterback-friendly system. Carr seems to be pretty cerebral in picking things up. He's been around for a while. He's coming off a really strong season here with the Raiders being efficient, getting the ball downfield. So I think for McDaniels, he's going to try to incorporate some of the things he did with New England. So Darren Waller, assuming he's coming back fully healthy, he should be treated very much like Rob Gronkowski. Hunter Renfrow, like many Patriots receivers we've seen in the past, Renfrow doesn't need much help here. He's already highly productive in a fantasy wide receiver too, but we know that there's some parallels there between him and Jacoby Myers, who the Patriots has had in the slot, and you had Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola, Wes Welker, the whole bit here. So there's some established familiar targets. He's made it work with a slot and a tight end before the Edelman-Gronkowski era, so nothing should change here with Renfrow and Waller being big beneficiaries and still being the top fantasy options for this team in the receiving core. Josh Jacobs should get a little bit more dedication here, I think. They are rebooting maybe their offense behind him. Peyton Barber is a free agent, so Josh Jacobs should also benefit highly here. So the principals, Jacobs, Renfrow, and Waller, pretty good here. I think that's going to limit whoever the next receiver is. They tried Brian Edwards and Zay Jones with the Henry Ruggs the third question mark here, but look at the Raiders. I think they're still very much going to be a Waller Renfrow team and also playing off Jacobs in the running game. So I would temper my expectations here for what they can do. The wide receiver core, I think the biggest thing with the Raiders, they also need to overhaul their defense. So I think you'll see some things like that. They do have some good pieces. Max Crosby rushing the passer has really helped, and some other guys there as well. But look at the Raiders. I think with Josh McDaniels' offense, I think it's going to only enhance and boost Waller and Renfro, and then the Jacobs is also going to be a better centerpiece here. Keep in mind, Josh McDaniels came working with Damian Harris. They like Alabama guys there in New England in terms of running the ball and having a key role regardless. So that's going to help the primaries here for the Raiders. And the Carr, again, should get bumped up, but really it's about the two receivers there, Waller, Renfro, and Jacobs, who can also really contribute well in the passing game. And I think you'll see that expansion here versus having put in maybe a James White type. If they want that type of player, they do have a Jalen Richard that you could involve. But I think it's going to be good for the principals of Las Vegas and whoever else they add here at wide receiver to help Brian Edwards on the outside in 2022. All right, so there you have a breakdown of the Raiders and their offseason outlook here, just like we did with the Chiefs and Broncos before them. We will close looking at the Los Angeles Chargers. What do they do for Justin Herbert here as he enters year 3 as their starter? We'll break that down for you. But before we do that, I got to tell you more about Built Bar. Built Bar, it helps you follow your resolutions. For me, I can tend to give up here in February going into March like we are now with our resolutions. But man, Built Bar makes it easy to stay on it. It's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them, and you don't even have to give up anything unhealthy here to know that Built Bar are going to be healthy for you all throughout the Lenten season. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be some of your new favorites here at Built Bar. Just like with all the Built Bars, the Puffs are covered in 100% chocolate. That's right. And they're all healthy for you while being awesome and tasty for you, and a great alternative for a candy bar. Go to Built.com and scroll down and see the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb with Built Bars. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams sugar, 4 grams net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which can have 240 calories, 30 grams sugar, and dozens of net carbs. A mint brownie, coconut almond. Just some of the flavors that are mouth-watering there for your regular Built Bars. They also have special flavors, just like last month in February, we had white chocolate, cookies, and cream. They're always coming out new flavors, so check back often to see what magic they've done at Built Bar to create another delicious protein bar. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, it is time to close the show here, and we've got one more team to talk about in the AFC West. Don't forget, we will have a combine analysis there, so we'll take it in 2 parts. That's what we'll do there early next week. We'll take it from the draft perspective, look at the prospects, who helped themselves, what teams are thinking coming out of it, and then we'll look at the offseason rumors aspect. That we'll maybe do a countdown of those that most important takeaways that weren't draft related from the combine. So we'll do that for you in a couple of shows to start next week. That would leave 3 divisions for you to finish up with, and we'll do that next week as well. We'll go to the AFC South, we'll go to the AFC North, and we'll close it all with the AFC East there next week. So sound good to you guys? And then we can get into the free agency frenzy the following week. So it should be very exciting here in the offseason. It's all compressed here pretty quickly, but the free agency is a big part, we know, of advanced scouting for fantasy football. Chargers should be active in the free agent market. They do have a couple of free agent concerns. The number one is Mike Williams at wide receiver. They got to take care of Mike Williams, and then they have Justin Jackson. Do they want to keep him as a reliable backup behind Austin Eckler, who is injured pretty often, or do they want to move on with youngsters and shake it up here? That's what the Chargers need to ask themselves. How important are these guys? There are some depth players at both positions there for the Chargers. Eckler, they can plug and play a different type of backup. With wide receiver, they have Joshua Palmer and Jalen Guyton, guys that can stretch the field. But they want some depth. They want some weaponry. The other free agent of note is the journeyman tight end who just produces and flashes wherever he goes for fantasy football. This might be it for him. Jared Cook. We'll see if he lands on another team here. So tight end is a possibility. I gave them Jalen Weidermeyer of Texas A&M in my latest mock draft. We'll see what goes on with Williams. They're expected to use the franchise tag on him. They have a ton of money under the salary cap. So why do they have it? Well, we know they haven't paid Justin Herbert yet that next rookie contract. It's funny, he's not brought up that deal just quite yet here in year 3. He'll come up definitely in year 4 ahead of the 5th-year option. Justin Herbert has exceeded expectations. He's everywhere. The Chargers need to get in the playoffs with a quarterback of this level. Their run defense was a big issue, so they'll do that and shore it up there pretty well. But they got to make sure the weapons are streamlined here and pleasing for Justin Herbert and that big arm. So it doesn't hurt to have more field stretchers. I think what they like about Williams, he's good chemistry with Herbert, and he's got a nice size for the red zone and he can stretch the field. So I think he'll be back here, at least on the franchise tag. Maybe he'll move on after this year if they don't get a long-term deal done and they got to pay Herbert and all that. And they have to worry about that. But right now, I think, again, Chargers' priorities, they should bring people back. But the bottom line is, again, strike while the iron is hot when you have that young quarterback there on a rookie deal. It should scream to the Chargers after what happened to the Bengals. Same draft class, Joe Burrow in 2020. What happened there in the Super Bowl in year 2? So the Chargers could have been that team with the way Herbert was playing. They got to make it happen here and really boost Herbert. And when they boost Herbert, that helps his fantasy football value. It helps all the receivers' value there as well. So we want Mike Williams to stay with Herbert for sure, playoff Keenan Allen, and maybe going to more 11 personnel or getting that tight end so we know that they have 3 reliable targets there that we can trust here in fantasy football, on top of Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield here for Los Angeles. So pretty exciting stuff going on here in this entire division. So looking forward to continue to break down more teams for you. But again, we'll take a little departure. The Combine will be in the books when we speak to you next on Locked On Fantasy Football on Monday. So keep that in mind. We'll take a little pivot to that so we can turn our attention soon to free agency and the offseason here. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Don't forget, Combine Breakdown's coming up here over the weekend. After that, we'll be ready for you here to keep bringing you the advanced scouting you need to dominate your fantasy football drafts eventually here in August and September. Now, make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Speaking of draft, Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with inside analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast, much like Locked On Fantasy Football, this show. And thanks so much for listening to Locked On Fantasy Football. We're free and available on all platforms as well. We're free and available to talk NFL reality crossing over to fantasy all off season long. So we'll do that for you. Keep bringing it for you on Locked On Fantasy Football. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinny Iyer. Have a great weekend and catch you on Monday as we recap the NFL Combine.